We have some new developments in the Menendez brothers case. Just last week, Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman held a press conference to give his opinion on whether or not the governor of California, Governor Newsom, should grant the habeas corpus petition that was filed by the brothers' attorney, Mark Garagos. He recommended that it not be granted, but in the press conference he made a lot of false statements. Today, March 11, 2025, Hochman made a public announcement regarding the upcoming resentencing hearing for Lyle and Eric Menendez. In this statement, DA Hochman formally opposed the brothers' request for resentencing and recited the same lies as he did in last week's press conference. In both of District Attorney Hochman's press conference and announcement today, he cited that due to their continued refusal to take full responsibility for the 1989 redrums of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, Hochman asserted that the Menendez brothers must admit fully the lies they allegedly told about their abusive upbringing before being considered for resentencing or release. He further claimed that newly introduced evidence regarding the brothers' allegations of abuse lacked credibility and did not justify altering their original life sentences without parole. Okay, now let's do a deep dive. DA Hochman clearly did not review the 1,000-plus pages of trial documents. He had a preconceived opinion and just skimmed over the evidence. He completely missed the point and showed zero understanding of what was actually at stake. It's clear that he only read transcripts from just the beginning of the first trial. His speech in the press conference took listeners back to 1996, when the general public did not believe that males could be SA'd. Now let's highlight some of the blatant lies told by DA Hochman. DA Hochman lied to the audience, stating that the brothers had never shown remorse or taken responsibility for their actions. This statement is blatantly false, as both Eric and Lyle Menendez have repeatedly expressed deep regret and taken full accountability for their actions over the years. Their remorse has been documented in numerous interviews, letters, and statements made during their time in prison. Additionally, these claims contradict the overwhelming support from their extended family, who have consistently vouched for the brothers' rehabilitation and genuine remorse. DA Hochman's claims only further demonstrate his failure to thoroughly review the evidence and understand the current reality of the case. DA Hochman asserted that the Menendez brothers must admit fully the lies they allegedly told about their abusive upbringing before being considered for resentencing or release. Okay, folks, I really want to take a deep dive on this one, so snap on the seatbelts and get ready for a ride. First and foremost, to every survivor of abuse, your pain is real, your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. The misconception that males cannot be victims of sexual abuse is not only deeply harmful but also invalidates the experiences of countless individuals who have endured unimaginable trauma. This stigma silences survivors, forcing them to carry their pain in isolation, and perpetuates a culture of shame and disbelief. It is a cruel injustice that diminishes the courage it takes to speak out and seek healing. To dismiss or deny the reality of male survivors is to deny their humanity, their suffering, and their resilience. DA Hochman, your words are not just dismissive, they are deeply harmful. They cut into the very core of what survivors of abuse fight against every single day: the fear of not being believed. This is exactly why Eric and Lyle Menendez didn't speak of the sexual abuse they endured for years, because of people like you, who perpetuate doubt and skepticism instead of compassion and understanding. The irony is staggering. You demand that they admit fully the lies about their abuse, yet it is your refusal to acknowledge the overwhelming evidence and expert testimony that keeps this cycle of disbelief alive. Your statements don't just hurt the Menendez brothers, they hurt every survivor who has ever been silenced by shame and fear. They reinforce the very stigma that keeps victims from coming forward, that tells them their pain isn't valid, that their truth will be dismissed. This is why the Menendez brothers didn't deserve life in prison. Their actions, while tragic, were born out of years of relentless abuse and psychological torment, circumstances that should have been considered as mitigating factors, leading to nothing more than a manslaughter case. Your ignorance of trauma psychology and your unwillingness to see beyond outdated stereotypes of masculinity are not just failures of your role, they are a betrayal of justice itself. Survivors deserve better. The Menendez brothers deserved better. And your words demand accountability, not just for the harm they've caused, but for the message they send to every survivor who is still waiting to be heard. An apology must be made, not just to the Menendez brothers, but to every survivor who has ever been told their pain is not valid. This is not just about justice. It is about restoring dignity to those who have been wronged and ensuring that no survivor ever feels invisible or unworthy of compassion again. You are seen, you are believed, and you are not alone. In 1996, societal views on sexual abuse were heavily influenced by traditional gender norms that often dismissed the possibility of men being victims. The prevailing belief was that sexual abuse primarily affected women, with male victims frequently overlooked or stigmatized. The notion of men being abused contradicted established stereotypes of masculinity, which portrayed men as strong, dominant, and invulnerable. As a result, male survivors of sexual abuse, like Eric and Lyle Menendez, face skepticism and shame, making it difficult for their trauma to be taken seriously. This lack of understanding and recognition hindered their ability to seek help and be believed, contributing to the challenges they faced during their trials. D.A. Hochman, the Menendez brothers were not lying when they stated that they were relentlessly abused sexually, emotionally, physically, and verbally for the first 18 to 21 years of their lives. Body language experts analyzing Eric and Lyle's testimony after the first trial identified clear indicators of truthfulness in their accounts. Their physiological responses, such as genuine tears, nasal congestion, and vocal changes, are recognized hallmarks of authentic emotional crying, which cannot easily be fabricated. Furthermore, nonverbal cues, including visible anxiety, avoidance behaviors, and shifts in posture, strongly suggested that the brothers were reliving genuine experiences of trauma and sexual abuse as they testified. The defense team presented over 50 witnesses, including behavioral health experts, teachers, coaches, and family members. Some behavioral health experts testified about the psychological impact of abuse without directly examining or interviewing Eric or Lyle. Their testimony focused on how trauma can profoundly affect the mind. Other behavioral health experts, who had examined and interviewed the brothers, testified that their psychological and emotional patterns were consistent with those seen in survivors of severe abuse. These observations added significant weight to the brothers' claims and underscored the importance of viewing the case through the lens of trauma. In addition, family members, friends, coaches, and teachers testified to either witnessing abuse directly or noticing strong signs that suggested it. These witnesses described troubling behaviors by both Jose and Kitty Menendez, further supporting the brothers' accounts. District Attorney Hochman cannot selectively choose which witnesses to believe in a case of this magnitude. Every witness was sworn under oath to tell the truth. Their testimony cannot be dismissed simply because it contradicts a preferred narrative. It is the court's responsibility, and by extension the DA's, to treat sworn testimony as truth unless clear evidence proves otherwise. Ignoring such critical accounts is not only irresponsible but also an affront to the integrity of the justice system. D.A. Hochman further claimed that newly introduced evidence regarding the brothers' allegations of abuse lacked credibility and did not justify altering their original life sentences without parole. Let's just get this story straight. D.A. Hochman does not have a background in mental health, so how could he possibly make an informed decision about the authenticity of this new evidence? First of all, it never should have gotten to this point where the brothers have already spent 35 years in prison. They were wrongfully convicted of first-degree redrum when it should have been manslaughter, with a sentence of 50 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. They should have been out 20 years ago, but society was not ready at that time to accept the fact that men could be abused. So, let's ask the obvious. Exactly how did D.A. Hochman attempt to authenticate the letter Eric wrote to his cousin Andy, which alluded to SA by his father? How did he verify the claim of the Menudo band member, who courageously came forward to reveal that Jose Menendez, the band's CEO, SAs him on multiple occasions? The answer is clear: he didn't. D.A. Hochman's handling of this case is nothing short of negligent, and he should be tried for malpractice. How can anyone, let alone a district attorney, blatantly disregard the expert witnesses from the first trial? How can anyone ignore the testimony of multiple family members, coaches, and teachers who all pointed to signs of abuse? Just because society in 1996 refused to believe that males could be victims of sexual abuse doesn't mean that disbelief should persist today. The evidence is there. It has always been there. Sexual abuse of males has been happening long before this trial, and society has finally begun to accept this reality. Yet somehow, DA Hochman clings to the outdated rules and toxic stigma of 1996 as if progress and understanding mean nothing to him. His refusal to evolve with the times is not just ignorant, it's harmful. It perpetuates the very disbelief and shame that silences survivors and denies them justice. DA Hochman's actions are a disgrace to the very system he claims to uphold. Furthermore, DA Hochman has expressed skepticism about relying on dramatized or reenacted portrayals of events, stating that he prefers to review source documents and factual evidence rather than media representations. He implied that those who support the Menendez brothers' early release have based their opinions on the Netflix series Monsters. In one of his statements, he suggested that many followers of the case have been caught up in the emotional drama, which he believes has clouded their judgment. However, the truth is that this series piqued the curiosity of many followers and inspired a large part of the new generation to explore the case further. It led them to dive deeper into the case by watching actual trial recordings to uncover the truth directly from the proceedings as they unfolded. Importantly, this new wave of interest has brought to light a deeper understanding of the psychological effects of SA on the human brain, an understanding that DA Hochman seems to lack. The new generation, in particular, recognizes the devastating impact of SA and has begun to accept the reality that males, too, can be victims. This broader awareness directly challenges the outdated perspectives that dominated during the Menendez brothers' initial trials. DA Hochman should take a moment to reflect on what it might have been like to be in the same situation as the Menendez brothers, young, vulnerable, and trapped in an environment of relentless abuse with nowhere to turn. If he were a child facing such overwhelming fear and trauma, does he genuinely believe he would have had the courage, clarity, or even the opportunity to seek help? The truth is, it's impossible for anyone to fully understand what they would do in such a situation unless they've lived it themselves. It's easy to pass judgment from the outside, but the psychological effects of SA can distort a victim's ability to think rationally or act in a way society deems appropriate. Instead of dismissing the new evidence and the brothers' claims, perhaps DA Hochman should consider the deeper, nuanced reality of the psychological scars they carry, scars that many now recognize, especially the newer generation, as valid and devastating truths. Even back in 1996, when societal understanding of male sexual abuse was limited, it was already difficult to fathom ignoring this kind of evidence. And now, nearly 3 decades later, we have moved far beyond that outdated disbelief. It's time for DA Hochman and others to face the truth. Men can be, and have been, victims of sexual abuse. Dismissing the accounts of these witnesses only perpetuates the harmful stigma that silences survivors and denies them justice. The reality is undeniable. It is time to acknowledge it and ensure that cases like this are handled with the fairness, compassion, and integrity they deserve. Ignoring such testimony is a disservice not only to the Menendez brothers, but to every survivor whose voice has been marginalized or ignored. DA Hochman has repeatedly criticized Eric and Lyle Menendez, claiming that their defense strategy is built on lies, the abuse excuse, and a refusal to take full responsibility for their actions. However, in his statements, he has made no mention of the concept of imperfect self-defense, a critical element that any legal professional of his stature should be well-versed in. Imperfect self-defense acknowledges that while the defendants may have acted out of a genuine belief that their lives were in imminent danger, their actions may not meet the legal standard for justifiable homicide. According to Dr. Vickery, Eric Menendez truly believed that his parents were imminently going to take his and his brother's lives to protect their family secret. This belief was not born out of paranoia but was deeply rooted in the years of relentless abuse and psychological manipulation they endured. Eric's psyche was shaped by a constant state of fear and survival, where every moment felt like it could be his last. His actions, though tragic, were driven by the overwhelming trauma and terror instilled in him by his abusers. DA Hochman's failure to address this critical aspect of the case demonstrates a lack of understanding of the psychological dynamics at play and undermines the very foundation of justice in this case. DA Hochman's refusal to acknowledge the concept of imperfect self-defense is not only negligent but also emblematic of a larger issue that plagued the Menendez trials. Neither he nor the prosecution team during the original trials wanted to admit the profound psychological dynamics at play in Eric and Lyle Menendez's actions. But let's not ignore the context of the time. The Rodney King case, which had sparked outrage after the acquittal of the officers involved, left Los Angeles in chaos. The city was reeling from the riots, and public trust in the justice system was at an all-time low. Shortly after, the O.J. Simpson trial further polarized public opinion, exposing deep racial and systemic divides. These high-profile cases created immense pressure on the DA's office to secure convictions and restore public confidence in the legal system. Another factor disturbing to the family is the fact that DA Hochman met with over 20 members of the Menendez extended family earlier this year to discuss the case of Eric and Lyle Menendez. Many family members had to fly in from out of state. The meeting was described as an informal off-the-record discussion, during which the families shared their perspectives on the brothers' personal growth during their 35 years in prison and their hopes for a potential resentencing. While DA Hochman called the meeting productive, some family members expressed dissatisfaction. A cousin of the brothers, Tamara Goodell, accused Hochman of being hostile, dismissive, and patronizing during the meeting. This further shows that DA Hochman came in with prejudice and an already biased decision. Furthermore, Tamara claimed his conduct left the family feeling re-traumatized and humiliated, eroding their trust in the DA's office. The family had hoped the meeting would bring them closer to reuniting with Eric and Lyle, but the tone of the interaction reportedly left them feeling disregarded. The family continues to advocate for the brothers' release, emphasizing their rehabilitation and the alleged abuse they endured as children. In response to DA Hochman's statement today regarding the resentencing hearing, defense attorney Mark Garagos strongly criticized Hochman's position, accusing the DA of serially abusing the Menendez brothers by misrepresenting facts and ignoring key evidence. Garagos argued that Hochman was attempting to undermine the substantial evidence supporting the brothers' long-standing claims of sexual and emotional abuse by their father. Garagos emphasized that all living family members, including relatives who previously believed the brothers' guilt, now fully support their release and have spoken publicly about the abuse they endured. Anna Maria Gibralt, a cousin of the Menendez brothers, also voiced her disappointment in DA Hochman's remarks. Gibralt has been an outspoken advocate for the brothers' release, asserting that their traumatic upbringing played a significant role in the tragic events that unfolded. She has worked alongside the Justice for Eric and Lyle Coalition, a family-led group that supports the brothers' bid for resentencing and emphasizes the impact of their abuse. The resentencing hearing remains scheduled for March 20th and 21st, 2025, where the court will hear arguments from both sides and review the presented evidence. The outcome of this hearing may determine whether the Menendez brothers' sentences are adjusted or if they will continue serving life in prison without parole. I would like to further summarize that the events of August 1989 cannot be excused, but they must be understood in light of the extreme and prolonged abuse Eric and Lyle endured at the hands of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. This crime was not a pattern of behavior, nor did it reflect a propensity for violence. Instead, it was an isolated, desperate, and tragic act driven by their overwhelming fear that, at any moment, their abusers would take their lives to keep the family's secret from being exposed, as they would lose everything they have worked for. This, my friend, is the concept of imperfect defense. Victims of abuse face numerous challenges, including the fear of retaliation if they disclose their abuse, the likelihood of not being believed, and the minimization of their experiences. Reporting to the police often results in insufficient evidence to take action, and attempts to escape can lead to being found and subjected to even more severe abuse and retaliation. Additionally, victims may struggle with feelings of shame, guilt, and isolation, further complicating their ability to seek help. In hindsight, a manslaughter conviction would have been more appropriate to reflect the mitigating circumstances surrounding the case. The second trial compounded this injustice. Key testimony regarding the abuse Eric and Lyle endured was severely limited, and the jury was presented with only the option of first-degree red rum. No lesser charges, such as second-degree red rum or manslaughter, were offered for consideration. This narrow scope denied the jury the opportunity to appropriately weigh the years of trauma leading up to the crime. The broader context of the first trial also raises concerns regarding timing. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office faced intense public and political pressure to secure convictions in high-profile cases following the controversial acquittals of O.J. Simpson and the officers involved in the Rodney King beating. This pressure likely influenced decisions to restrict evidence of abuse and portray the case as one of cold-blooded red rum rather than a complex situation rooted in years of mistreatment. Since their conviction, Eric and Lyle have demonstrated exemplary behavior in prison. They have served for over 30 years as model inmates, mentoring others, fostering a positive prison environment, and expressing deep remorse for their actions. Their transformation underscores their capacity for rehabilitation and their readiness to rejoin society as reformed individuals. Recent legislative changes further highlight the need to reconsider their sentence. California law now states that individuals under the age of 26 at the time of their crime cannot serve sentences exceeding 50 years and are eligible for parole after 25 years. Eric and Lyle, who were 21 and 18 at the time of their offense, fall squarely within this framework. Continuing to hold them without the possibility of parole contradicts the principles of this law. They have served more than enough time for their crime and were further punished unjustly by being separated from each other for 22 years. So, within the next couple of weeks, as this case is presented to the judge at the resentencing hearing, I respectfully urge the judge to consider the following points as summarized in this podcast. 1. Overwhelming testimony of abuse. 2. Hindsight on conviction. A manslaughter charge would have more accurately reflected the circumstances and motivations behind their actions. 3. Trial limitations. The second trial restricted testimony about abuse and denied the jury the option of considering lesser charges. 4. Legislative changes. Both Eric and Lyle Menendez were under the age of 26 at the time they committed the redrums. 5. Rehabilitation. Eric and Lyle have proven their capacity for growth and reform through their exemplary conduct in prison. 6. Isolated nature of the crime. Their actions were directed solely at their abusers and were not part of a pattern of violent behavior. 7. And last but not least, the timing of their second trial when the Los Angeles District Attorney was pressured to get a conviction. Justice is not merely about punishment. It is also about fairness, understanding, and the potential for redemption. Eric and Lyle Menendez have more than demonstrated their remorse and capacity for change. Considering their rehabilitation, the overwhelming evidence of abuse, and recent legal reforms, I plead to the judge to grant their immediate release. Well, friends, that's it for today. Please stay tuned for my next podcast, as there are even more inconsistencies in DA Hochman's statements in the press conferences.